Everyone, and welcome to our Board of Governors question and answer session with our candidates on behalf of the American Bar Association's Law Student Division. My name is Kareem Arif. I am the current chairman of the ABA's Law Student Division, and with us we have our esteemed candidates, who I will let introduce themselves in a minute, but for the time being, I'd like to turn the floor over to our elections director and one of our governors, Mr. Chase Hudson. The floor is yours, my friend.
Thanks, Kareem. So as Kareem said, my name is Chase Hudson. I am the elections chair. I'm also the Third Circuit governor. So as a quick introduction, the way today is going to run is it will have 4 sections. We will allow each candidate 2 minutes of introductory statements. We will then go into the general Q&A. These are these are questions that have been collected from the board and assembly members. We will then run into audience questions. If you go to your GoToWebinar control panel, down to questions, you can send questions privately to me, and whenever we get to the public Q&A section, I will ask your questions. Finally, we'll close out with 2 minutes for each candidate to give closing statements. That being said, we'll now begin. The way it will work, and I planned everything but this, we will do a coin toss to determine who goes first. That individual will give opening statements first. The other individual will begin the Q&A, and the individual who gave their opening statements first will begin the audience Q&A. Finally, we will close it out, the individual who gave their opening statement second, giving their closing statement first. Would either one of you like to call heads or tails?
Heads.
All right. Tails. John Weber, please give your introductory statement.
I don't get to defer to the second half if I want to. I'm kidding, I don't. Hi, my name is John Weber. I am a 2L at the University of Louisville, Brandeis School of Law. I'm from Louisville, went to the University of Louisville for undergrad as well, where I majored in political science. Following graduation, I served in Teach for America for 2 years in Nashville, where I earned my master's degree in education. Following that, like I said, I came back home to go to law school. And as soon as I got into law school, I wanted to get involved in the Student Bar Association. It's something that I've done in undergrad and enjoyed representing students to the faculty, to the administration, and I did that as soon as I could by becoming a 1L representative. And during that process and that year, the SBA president asked if I would be interested in running for an ABA position circuit-wide. And so I ran for and became the 6th Circuit governor over 18 law schools in Kentucky, Michigan, and Ohio. And then served in that capacity and still do. But in the spring, I had the opportunity to also run for the House of Delegates position to represent the Law Student Division to the ABA's House. So with that, I have lots of national and regional experience in the ABA, and then I'm also on the Louisville Bar Association Board of Directors, where I was appointed by my dean. So I've got experience from the local level to the national level in all different types of bar associations and representing law students. So that's why I'm interested in this position. Serving on the Board of Governors as a law student member, where it's a multifaceted role. Yes, I'll sit on the Law Student Division Board. Yes, I'll serve in the House of Delegates, things that I've already done. But also have the privilege of serving.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, sir. Thank you.
Meredith?
All right. Thanks, everyone, for being here tonight and also for watching this. I just want to introduce myself and then also talk about why I'm interested and motivated in this position. So I'm a 2L student at Harvard Law School. I currently serve as both Harvard's representative to the ABA and as the Law Student Division Liaison to the Center for Professional Responsibility. In a lot of ways, I'm a non-traditional student, so I'm obviously a woman, I'm gay, I'm a parent. I've also worked for 12 years before coming to law school in the nonprofit and public interest and political world. I'm sure we'll talk more about that throughout the next half hour. I'm really interested in this position and really motivated to do this job because I think there's a lot at stake, and that's a really key moment for this position. The Board of Governors is obviously right now involved in a lot of major policy decisions that impact law students. I think the Board of Governors also right now really recognizes that the breadth and depth of student involvement is key to the ABA's future. And I also think that now that we're a couple years out from implementing free student membership, it's a critical time to evaluate the success of that program and strengthen it going forward. I think when you're thinking about what this position needs, what I think it needs is professionalism, experience, and commitment. You know, someone who can advocate for students in the big room, someone who has worked with leaders who have a lot more experience, someone who has represented and led organizations. I think it's helpful to have someone who has managed budgets and some of the organizational back-end work that I've done as an executive director of a nonprofit, and someone who's made, you know, tough organizational decisions because, like John says, not only are you the law student representative, but you also have a fiduciary duty to the ABA as a whole. I think I'm the right person for that job for reasons I'm sure we'll talk about in the next half hour. And so thanks again for having us. And
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Meredith. That's your time. All right, so with that, we'll go into the general Q&A. And as John gave his opening statement first, Meredith, you get the first question.
Great.
That question is, in your opinion, what is the most important function of the Board of Governors?
I think I mean, obviously there's a lot of functions of the Board of Governors. I think the most important function of it, broadly speaking, is to be the corporate manager for the entire ABA. So make sure that the organization has the financial sustainability to keep it going for years and ahead, and also to make sure that it has the vision and the program that's necessary to make it as relevant as possible to its mission, which is largely to strengthen the legal profession. So that's what I would say is the most important.
All right. And John Weber, same question.
Yeah, I think the Board of Governors is important because the ABA is a huge organization, and having served in the House of Delegates, I appreciate the ability for that entity to set policy for the ABA. But you can't convene hundreds and hundreds of members all the time. And as we know, they meet twice a year, and that is just not enough for an organization like the ABA. There has to be something else helping to lead the organization. Of course, we've got officers, the president, all of those officers that serve in their capacity and in their elect capacity. And I think the Board of Governors is there to support them, to speak for the ABA when the House of Delegates is not in session, to be able to, again, implement that agenda and those policy priorities and initiatives throughout the year. So it's the big picture of the ABA, setting and implementing the goals of the entire organization.
Thank you. And John Weber, question to you. What do you believe is your opponent's greatest strength?
That's a great question because I really enjoyed looking through your resume. I think we have a lot of things in common based on some of the things that you've done. I think that would be it, the variety of experiences that she has had before coming to law school.
All right, and Meredith, same question to you.
Thank you. I think, John, obviously you've been a great leader within the law student division and helped, as a circuit governor, bring people together in your region. And I think that leadership takes, it takes a strong leader to be in that position. So, similar answer, I think.
Thanks.
All right, Meredith, question to you. Whose views do you represent on the Board of Governors, your own or the law student divisions?
Great question. I think the answer is a little bit of both. I mean, you are, of course, representing the law student division, especially when there's any particular position that the Law Student Division has taken, and it's your job to represent that position to the Board of Governors. I don't think that it's a position that is entirely devoid of your own personal opinion. I mean, I think one of the things you want to look for is someone who has opinions that are in line with what's right for the Law Student Division, and the judgment to be able to recognize when something's your own opinion or versus just the Law Student Division stance. And so, I think there are examples of times where it might make sense for you, you're in a room, you're in a board meeting, you need to act quickly, and you lean on your own understanding of what's right for the Law Student Division, which is ultimately, I think, your own opinion.
Thank you. John Weber, same question.
Yeah, I think ultimately student interest and perspectives are a big priority, but they're not the only priority. And that's a difference between my position right now in the House of Delegates. I was bound to vote the way that the Law Student Division Council voted, and was happy to do that, happy to represent law students in that way. This is a little bit different, and in the research that I did in talking to John Loros and others that have served in this position, they were clear that the duty is to the ABA as a whole. And I think that's important to realize that I am, if elected, I want to advocate for law students every day on the job, but ultimately I do have to make my own vote on the board. Now, that being said, you represent the law students in other ways. You're the face of law students to a lot of people in the ABA. It's important to put a good face forward to be able to work with all of the other entities inside the ABA. It's also important to understand the issues and be able to bring them back to the Law Student Division Council. And I hope that with the experience that I've gotten already to this point, and that I would continue to get if elected, I could be a sort of advisor to the Law Student Division Council, working with the current board and then in the elected capacity and whoever comes in, including people that I've worked very closely with this year. So I think it goes two ways. You are representing the best policies for law students to the board, but also bringing back things and helping to advise the Law Student Division as well.
Thank you. And just a reminder to the audience, if you would like to submit questions, you may do so on the GoToWebinar control panel. Just submit to me privately. Thank you. Now a question for John Weber again. What issue above all else would you advocate for with the Board of Governors?
Yeah, that's a tough question to think of one, but I think probably to me it would be between, let me say this, it would be between the UBE and public service loan forgiveness. I think I would come down on the UBE because we have issues as law students that could be addressed by carrying the torch forward on the UBE. The heavy lifting has been done, and I'm thankful to people that have had this position in the past, Chris Jennison, again, John Loros, that have worked towards this effort. But it's not done yet. We've got to continue expanding it to various states because law students need a portable accreditation, certification, bar passage or bar standard to be able to use across state lines. Here in Louisville, Indiana is 5 minutes away, but you have to take 2 different bar exams. Or people in our generation, maybe Meredith and I would like to both go serve as the Baltimore public defender for a year or 2 after law school. Things like the UBE would be able to make that a possibility, not to mention just the portability of our degrees to be able to go where jobs are, because we all know that's an issue facing law students. So the UBE would really have a concrete impact on law students, and I think with the ABA it's important to make that distinction. We can be very amorphous, but in this case we can directly affect law students' pocketbooks their wallets, and their ability to go get jobs.
Thank you. Meredith, same question.
Sure, I'm sorry about my motion sensor lights there. I mean, frankly, I agree with John totally on the UBE. I think that's a top issue that I'd want to advocate for, but let me just give one other issue for the sake of something different. An issue that I really care about working on and advocating for in this position, which is a little bit more behind the scenes organizational, is just the future of law student recruitment and involvement within the ABA. I think from the perspective of what's best for the ABA in the long run, having more students involved, casting a wider net, and then deepening students' involvement so that we don't only get involved as free members right now or maybe as premium members right now, but we find a niche within the ABA, a leadership role to play within the ABA, and become committed, lifelong members of the ABA that contribute to its overall mission and success. I think that's absolutely critical to the long-term sustainability of the ABA, and it's also obviously very important to the profession and would benefit law students. So I have a lot of, I focus a lot of my time as Harvard's rep on recruiting on campus. Harvard's been a campus that has not been as involved, I think, as it should. So I recruited almost 400 people last semester to join. I want to find other ways to bring in schools that aren't involved in, and I want to work with other Board of Governors and ABA leaders to figure out, is the current membership structure working? How can we improve it? And how can we create more channels for leadership development for students within the ABA?
Thank you, Meredith. Again, a question for Meredith. What are the pros and cons of programs that allow for limited licensed legal technicians to practice in a given jurisdiction?
I don't know that much about that particular topic, actually, enough to speak on the pros and cons. So that's something that I need to educate myself on, really, before I give like a thorough answer. So I'll kick that one to John.
John Weber, same question.
Would you mind repeating it?
Yes. What are the pros and cons of programs that allow for limited licensed legal technicians to practice in a given jurisdiction?
Gotcha. Yeah, I think those are important for a couple of reasons, and even tying that back into the paid externship ban that was lifted. You've got a lot of reasons why law students should be able to have these other experiences. One, it is good for law students. They learn, they are enriched through the process of getting outside of the classroom and being able to have concrete, real-life legal experience. Two, it's good for the community. You're serving and filling legal needs that we all know are there and need all hands on deck. And so this enables law students to help to fit that need. Three, it's a financial issue again, and I know that that's kind of a common theme, but I think it's an important one. And being able to, I realize not all of these are paid, but being able to get outside of the law school, and if you have an externship that allows you to make an income, that is really important for law students because we're taking on debt. We are paying to have these externship opportunities when other organizations might very well be willing to pay us to do it. So you've got, again, the ban was lifted by the ABA. Now we've got to advocate for individual schools to allow law students, when they go out and do exactly what you're talking about, Chase, if the organization wants to pay for our services, then they should be able to. And lastly, I think that plays into mental health. Financial issues are so important to the mental health issues of our generation. That's not even unique to law students, but is especially pervasive in law school. So I think it really addresses a wide variety of issues. Again, first and foremost being...
I'm sorry, John, that's your time. Sorry, everyone. All right. So we have not received any questions from the audience. Therefore, in the interest of fairness, we will switch candidates and now enter the third phase. However, we will continue questions from the board and questions from the assembly until we receive questions from the audience. If that does not happen, we will move into closing statements at approximately 8:05. Therefore, Meredith, this question is for you. While we've already talked briefly about the UBE, can you tell me what are the two most significant arguments for and against the adoption of the universal bar exam? Uniform bar exam, excuse me.
No problem. I think, I think a lot of these have already been mentioned, but I think the arguments that are most important in favor of the universal bar exam are, first of all, that, especially coming out of the recession, law students and law graduates are in a position where it just doesn't make sense to restrict our job market to state by state. And so people are mobile, they're moving around a lot. And so I think it makes sense to allow people to take a bar that opens it up to multiple states. Secondly, I think it can be prohibitively expensive for students to have to take multiple bar exams for multiple states, and a lot of students don't know, exactly where they want to practice. So I think those are the reasons in favor of the UBE. I'm strongly in favor of the UBE. I think the challenges with it, or some of the arguments against it, are that, first of all, if you have a state-specific bar exam, you're able to test more thoroughly on state law, which is what a lot of people, of course, are going to focus their practice on. And I also, the law does, a lot of our law is at the state level, so the law differs a lot state to state. And for students and graduates that really want to focus within a particular state, I don't think the uniform bar exam, by generalizing the test and curriculum, necessarily aids in their preparation and development for knowing about that state law in particular. So that's what I would say would be the major arguments for and against.
Thank you. John Weber, same question.
Yeah, I'll start with against, because I've already talked about for, but I said it was my most important issue, so I'm happy to talk about why it is important. But I've had experience talking with the Chief Justice of Supreme Court, of the state Supreme Court. I don't know how detailed I should get with that, but I have advocated for the UBE to the very people that are in charge, and I know that even those that are interested have concerns. So a couple of those, just giving two. One, and Meredith already hit on it, there are very real state law differences, and I think it's a valid concern to say, well, we want practitioners in our state to know our laws. And that kind of feeds into the second point, which is more of a public policy type of reason. Voters in those states have elected people to pass certain laws and things that are priorities for them, and we want people that are going to practice within that jurisdiction to know those and be able to enforce them. Now, that being said, I obviously am much more on the other side and do advocate for a passage of the UBE in more states. I'm glad that we have made progress in lots of states to date, but there's always still work to go. So number one, like I said before, is portability of the degree, being able to move where the jobs are. I was talking with Kareem while we were at the mid-year meeting, and he was talking about someone that lived in California, and their spouse got a job in Florida. The person said, I would love for you to take that job, but know that I will not take the bar in another state, so I'm going into early retirement. That's not an efficient use of the talent and education and resources of our legal profession.
I'm sorry, John, you're out of time. So again, John, while I'm sure I hate this question as much as you do, it's a necessary interview question. What would you say is your greatest weakness?
Yeah, I think in this position uniquely, my greatest weakness would be in, I think the best way to frame it would be I considered running for chair, and in fact had some people talk to me about running for chair. But I feel like my strengths and weaknesses better serve me for this position. So I'm not dodging your question. Believe it or not, I have weaknesses just like everybody else. Yeah, very hard to believe. But as far as my weaknesses, I think that I had some growing pains as a circuit governor, somebody that was trying to lead an organization that we didn't see each other face to face, that we were over hundreds of miles apart. And while we had very real accomplishments and achievements in that position, the specific organization of that group was not my strength. And so that's why that is important for the person who's running for chair. And I felt that my skills would be better suited to serve in this capacity as a law student member on the Board of Governors.
Thank you. Meredith, unfortunately, same question.
No problem. I think just in terms of candidate running for this position, you know, I have a lot of experience within the ABA. It hasn't been as much within the law student division itself. So most of my experience has been working on campus to recruit people into the ABA here, but then also working within the Center for Professional Responsibility, where I'm the student liaison there. And so, you know, frankly, as a candidate, I think I just don't know as many people within the law student division as I would ideally want to know running for this position. You know, I don't personally know all the circuit governors. I've met several people at last year's annual meeting, for example. But I think that's a challenge for me. I think it's certainly something that's overcomable. And I think, you know, my strengths outweigh that and prepare me well for this for the actual duties of the job.
Thank you. Meredith again, and this will be the final question. If you are to be elected as representative to the Board of Governors, what public figure, past or present, do you hope to emulate?
Great question, Chase. Huge question, really. I feel like I could think about that for a long time. Past or present public figure that I would like to emulate? Oh, man. You know, I'll just say that I, especially as a parent, this week, I'm sure a lot of people read, I don't remember exactly where it was, but, you know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg had an article out somewhere where she was talking about, you know, managing her time as a parent in law school, which is something that really jumped out to me. And she talked about how to essentially structure her life so that she was being the most efficient, getting the most out of her time in both camps and balancing her priorities in that way. And I think that's something that, you know, I would like to emulate because, you know, I do have a toddler, I have another kid on the way, so there's that. But then also I really do believe in working quickly, working smartly, getting a lot done. And in this position, I think what that means is, you know, not just being someone who shows up to the Board of Governors meetings and speaks up, you know, only if student issues are involved. But what I think it means is, you know, working smartly, which means talking with people one-on-one about things that matter before the meeting happens. I think that's where the real work occurs, is outside the actual board meetings. And then, you know, working with people to develop and strengthen the law student division while also serving the board, you know, more generally. So you know, that's who I would emulate.
Thank you, Meredith. John, same question.
Agreed. Tough question and hard to pin down one specific person. As I was trying, excuse me, as I was trying to think of how I would answer that question, rather than one person coming to mind, what came to my mind was a set of characteristics. And so I would hope that in this position I could be diplomatic, that I could represent the will of, you know, or the best interest of law students, that I could be someone, like Meredith said, that is willing to stand up and voice our opinions and not just blend in. So I think that's somebody that is a team player and generally listens, and is able to synthesize lots of different viewpoints. And so if I had to pick somebody, just again to answer your question, I'm thinking maybe like a Jimmy Carter post-presidency, where he tried to bring people together, negotiate, and generally just be a leader that people like to follow, that earned respect, and lived into it by being consistent, by serving, by embodying the things that he stood for. So again, to me, it's more about those traits and characteristics, and those would be big shoes to fill. But here's hoping.
Thank you. We now move into the closing statements portion. Thinking back on it, I came up with a rather complicated process for switching this. I'm afraid I messed it up at some point, but if I am correct, John Weber, you won the coin toss in the beginning. Therefore, Meredith Parnell, you may give your closing statements first.
Great. Again, I just want to thank everyone for both being here tonight and then watching this in the weeks ahead leading to the actual online election. Thank you very much for considering your options and for voting. I want to use this time to, I think, emphasize a little bit about my experience that I think makes me right for this job, and just in case you don't want to read through my resume bullet by bullet. So the experience that I have before I started law school, I think, makes me the professional that's right for this position. Among other things, I directed a 6-state nonprofit organization. I personally was bottom line responsible for over a $500,000 annual budget, which is nothing compared to the ABA, but it was a scrappy nonprofit, and it was my responsibility to manage the team and to do the fundraising from donors that pulled that budget together. I took over that group in 2008. And so it was right as the economy was crashing around us, and through just sheer grit, hard work, and commitment, I was able to build that organization throughout those recession years, while my other peers were, making the organization smaller or even closing them down. I currently sit on multiple other boards. I have had experience reporting to boards. My most recent job before coming to law school was a national program director, where I managed large-scale projects, fundraise, manage staff sort of up and down. And so I think all of that organizational leadership experience means that you can trust me in a room full of experienced people at the peak of their careers. I know how to lobby one-on-one without being annoying. I know how to advocate for position. I've been the public face of a group. I know how to educate myself about policies that matter, and I know how to, just work hard, manage my time, and get things done on a deadline.
I'm sorry, Meredith. That's the end of your time. You may briefly conclude, though.
Okay, just thank you so much again, and thanks for voting in a couple minutes.
Right. John, your closing statements.
Thank you for listening to us discuss some of these issues. They're important. This is an important position, one that I don't take lightly, and I hope you don't either. So thank you for being informed and making the best decision. With that being said, I hope that you'll choose to vote for me, and I would love to reach out and talk to you if you have questions, because a big thing that I want to do is listen and hear what we can do on a national level to make a difference for you. That, like I said, going into my experience, it's from local to national and lots in between, and so that local part matters to me. Not just sitting on the board, but being involved on campuses. So what can we do to really make an impact in your life and in your future? So with that, I think that I'm the best candidate to be able to get these policy issues through, because I've got experience with them. I've worked on them in committees. I've had debates with law students and others outside of the law student division. I've been involved in the House of Delegates as we've debated them. Now, with that experience comes a network, and I admittedly don't know everything about the ABA, as people that have served for 30 years would still say. But I can confidently say if I don't know the answer, I at least know who to ask. And I've probably worked with them in some capacity or interacted with them in some capacity throughout my time in the ABA. With that being said, I don't want to lose the student perspective. Again, it's important to me. I want to listen. I want to be there and be available for students. So again, please reach out to me. But this position uniquely is tailored to my interests and experiences, I believe, because it's multifaceted. I've served on the Law Student Division Council in the House of Delegates, which are 2 out of the 3 components of this position.
I'm sorry, John, that's your time. You may briefly conclude that.
And thirdly, being able to advocate for us and not be scared to rub elbows with lawyers, judges, and elected officials, because I've done it before. Thank you so much again for being here. Have a great evening.
All right, I'd like to thank our panelists, John Weber and Meredith Parnell. I would also like to thank our chair, Kareem, and the staff for all the hard work they do. And that brings an end to our Q&A. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thanks, Chase.
Thank you.